Hello, my name is Christy Bleiseffer, and I'm the newest staff writer for Poets and Quants. Thank you for joining us today for a chat about the new online MBA at Washington University's Olin Business School. I want to welcome our guest, Patrick Moreton, Professor of Practice and Strategy and Management, Academic Director of the MBA Global Immersion, and Academic Director of the new online MBA at Olin. Thank you, Patrick, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Christy. It's great to be here.
That's great. So I guess let's just start with a bit about your new program and tell us why Olin decided to launch into the online space now.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk about the program. The sort of motive behind it was, I think really a sea change on both the supply side and the demand side in the MBA market. On the demand side, suddenly people have this enormous supercharged set of skills working in the virtual environment, which really, I think, created an opportunity to rethink what would you do with a population of people who now really have a very different understanding of what you can do successfully in that environment. And then on the supply side, obviously our faculty went through a huge, sort of very steep, but quite successful learning curve that gave them really a very different set of tools than we've had in the past. And so you put those two things together, and it seemed kind of like obvious that there was really time to at least explore this. And we're already in the process of doing that with specialized master's programs that we had. And so it was sort of a logical step to then think about what kind of online MBA might we offer and how would it fit within the sort of competitive landscape out there. We obviously wanted to do something different. That brought something meaningfully new to the market. And so we took a little bit of time to sort that out and ended up with what we think is the right kind of positioning for the program. So fundamentally, we believe that everything we know from the traditional MBA, conceptually, the sort of tools that you need to sort of make good decisions about product markets, supply chains, managing people, all of that remains relevant in the new world of increasingly digitalized or technology-enabled business. And so what we tried to do then was really craft an experience in that new technology. So it's online, you're going to be working with those tools, but also with an eye towards really trying to bring those concepts to the technologies that are hitting businesses so rapidly right now. Right. And with the goal really of helping people navigate that sea change that's happening around them with some comfort and really giving them kind of an adroit ability to sort of see in the new really things that they're quite successful at already and how to apply them. And so that more or less was the position that we end up with, which is this sort of leadership in the digital age. So far, we're really excited about it. Our faculty have really embraced that.
Right. And so you're welcoming your newest cohort or your first cohort in January. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, very exciting. Well, tell us a little bit about the curriculum and learning experience, duration, flexibility, all those kinds of things that would be interesting to an online MBA prospect.
Yeah, so it's the sort of typical path through it. We're looking at somewhere on the order of 3 years, more or less like a professional MBA, usually taking 2.5 courses per semester. The first half is what we would call the traditional core in terms of marketing, finance, operations, strategy, et cetera. And again, those are being taught, though, with this lens of, okay, how does new technology change the kinds of solutions that emerge for those sets of problems? With the goal that we want people to have really a facility and familiarity with these. And so if they see many repetitions of a particular technology being played out, it gives them the kind of judgment, or if you will, that sort of situational awareness that allows them to sort of manage in that new environment. So the core is deeply embedded with those sorts of cases, but it's still basically our core from our MBA program in terms of the concepts and what we're applying. So it's very much an MBA program in that regard. So then about halfway through, you begin sort of an elective phase where you'll have choices. Right now, for the first couple of cohorts, we're looking to have 2 to 3 in each area that the students could choose from. And at that point, you sort of build your own sort of pathway through with an emphasis on, for example, if you wanted marketing or fintech or, sort of digitalized supply chain issues. These are some of the areas that we think people will want to do deeper dives. We also have a component, and this is not something that's in any of our other MBA programs, which is what we call the Digital Impact Project. And the idea here is that we want the students to take what they're learning and actually apply it in a fairly deep dive on a particular company or context. And so that begins in the first semester with sort of an overview of the landscape to help people sort of pick their project. And then throughout the core, they'll be doing assignments that help inform that project. And then it comes together in the last 2 semesters where they essentially will have the sort of summation. It might be a business plan for a new entrepreneurial idea. It might be the implementation of a technology at their company. There's a range of things that you can do with it. And the idea being that we want this personalized and real. And so in that process, we would also supplement it with coaching from faculty to help in the projects, as well as our alumni and sort of our extended network.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Are there in-person learning experiences that these students can participate in?
Not as a class, but it is an experiential program. And so let me give you an example of the way in which that would translate. So I've been working on an example of helping people sort of understand what's the difference between digital marketplaces like Amazon or Shopify enabled stores and physical retailing. And so to sort of set that up, I created an assignment essentially where people go out and walk a shopping mall and sort of identify what's there, what's the shopping process look like, what is it doing, so that you understand kind of what's the core problems of shopping, if you will.
Right.
You're experiencing it, right? And you try and get people to do it with an awareness that they haven't had in the past, just by making them reflective about it. And so we also had people go to shopping like a strip mall and sort of compare that, okay? And when you actually start to look at these things that we just take for granted and really don't see, and say, well, that's interesting. Like shopping malls are dominated by big brands selling women's and men's clothing. Why would that happen? Where's that coming from? And strip malls are dominated by small, sort of one-off singular locations. And shopping malls have huge parking lots because people stay a long time and they comparison shop. Oh, okay. Strip malls have small parking lots because people, they come in and they're transactional. So you start to understand it by being there and physically looking at what you're seeing. And so you can then take that and say, okay, what is Amazon doing to actually work with those kind of buying processes? And how does this technology sort of play out? So you can there see how traditional business and new technology-enabled businesses are really solving the same set of problems in different novel ways. And so that's a place where, we're not in a classroom discussing that, but I'm actually out living it and participating in it. And I think we're going to be trying to populate all of our courses with that type of an assignment. And with our goal is to also draw on the fact that people are geographically spread around the country, but ultimately around the world. And that brings a lot of heterogeneity that can then be brought into the conversation itself.
Oh, interesting. Very good. So in an online format, how do you teach the soft skills and ensure that MBAs lead with both kind of the technical and the people side of the leadership skills?
Yeah, well, in many ways, the first thing I think is important to recognize that we're already leading in a virtual world in ways that we haven't really acknowledged. And so even before the pandemic forced people to go online and sort of not see face to face, a great deal of coordination, collaboration was happening by way of email and any number of sort of collaborative hubs. And so that's been there for a while, but we just haven't sort of seen it. And what we're trying to do now is actually be more mindful about the processes that we're using there. So the people are more mindful in their leadership and say, okay, is this something that I want to do synchronously? Is this something I want to do asynchronously? Mm-hmm. How do I align everybody on the same technological platform to facilitate better asynchronous or synchronous communication? And so, those are things that getting stuff done, right? The soft skills of how do you motivate and align people, where the technology is really we're sort of catching up. And I think that's something that's going to bleed into our full-time MBA program and part-time MBA or professional MBA program as we sort of unpack it. I also think that learning to present, meaning have a presence in the virtual world, lends itself in many ways to the same sort of training we've been doing with how to get people up to stand and deliver, thinking about the setting of where you're speaking from, if you're going to be in an online market. Are you appropriately dressed, lit, and is your sound quality representing you? And so in many ways, it reminds me of when in the 1980s, I joined the workforce and dress for success was suddenly like, oh, here's how do I get ready? So there's a little bit of that that's going to come into this, I think, as well. But many of the sort of soft skills of actually sort of communicating, I think we actually in some ways have not thought as much about the reality of communicating through these technologies in the past. And in many ways, I think the online version will be more mindful about that for the simple reason that you're online and you have to work with it.
Absolutely. I think we all had to kind of adjust to an online world and learn this all, very quickly.
And we've done remarkably well, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's an ongoing process. We're not there, but when you think about where we are relative to 2 years ago, when this hit, I mean, people have a great deal of facility now with it that I think they're already leading in that way. And so having conversations around what do you do in this context is now possible in a way that it wouldn't have been in the past. With a significant portion of the workforce probably going to be remote or partly remote, people are going to bring lots of experience of what it means to lead an individual. What can you do in face-to-face or can't do in face-to-face? And I think that awareness is going to be quite interesting in the classroom conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what difference do you see in Olin's program? What does it bring to the online market?
Yeah, well, it's an Olin program first and foremost. And so you'll see embedded in really the content of it and the process are 4 pillars. Values-based, data-driven. It's experiential. I already talked a little bit about kind of some of the ways in which we're thinking about that. It's entrepreneurial. We are a leading school for entrepreneurs. We're very happy with poets&quants' recent sort of acknowledgement of that fact. And so I think at the end of the day, we want to bring those, and global is the last one. And I think that one there, what we're trying to do is make sure that people are connected to a global network. I mean, we're fortunate because we've got programs in China. We've got a very successful executive MBA program in Shanghai that's been now in its 20th year and is still going strong. We've got strong presence in our global immersion, and we've got contacts in South America as well as in Europe, in Barcelona in particular. We've got a really strong presence in Tel Aviv and Israel, and we also have an EMBA program in Mumbai, and we're planning on bringing that network to bear in the sort of classroom visitors. And so an important component I didn't mention earlier is that all the classes will have outside speakers and panelists to come in and sort of talk about what's going on. And so we're hoping and planning on tying in those networks that are global to the class so that if you're interested in fintech, for example, you know what's going on in China from people that are actually developing it in that space, or what's going on in Mumbai in the software sort of world that's happening in Bangalore. So those are all components of what it will be that make it sort of an Olin program. And that's been successful differentiation for us and the other ones. I also think that because we're not just standing up an existing program in this new one, we said, let's start whole cloth. What do we want this to look like and build it up from the ground up? I think we're going to be ahead of the game in the content and this real commitment to having fresh material and really designing into the courses themselves a process for bringing in outside speakers, for bringing in people who are current in what's going on is going to bring a freshness to it that I don't think you're going to see in the market right now. And so we're pretty excited about that. It's a lot of work. It's really exciting work though. And one of the advantages of Olin is we're a relatively compact school. And so it's not like turning the Titanic, right? We can do some maneuvering that it might elude a larger institution or certainly slow it down. And so, Dean Taylor's been really remarkable in his leadership and helping, really lead a strategic renewal of pretty much all our programs. And so I think we're likely to achieve that in our online program as well.
Very good. So what kind of leader does Olin kind of envision to create with this online program?
So I think it's values-based, data-driven are the front of the ship, if you will, it's the prow. And that's a person who, and this is, I think, really, really important with digital transformation, where the power of these tools is both enormous and largely unfamiliar, right? And so the power with data allows you to get precision and understanding and the potential to do tremendous amounts. But with that comes a real need to be reflective about, okay, what are the consequences of that?
Right.
And we're living that reality writ large right now in what's going on in social media, for example. And, you know, we don't have established norms and rules around these technologies that are guardrails. And so an Olin leader will spend time thinking about those and understand that he or she really owns that problem.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the culture that we really bring. And you see that across all of our programs. And so I think that's probably one of the key sort of elements that I'm hoping for. I think, I used to, when I was like running our executive MBA program in China, when I was trying to explain to students what we were trying to do, is it's important that you know what to do and how to get it done. Right. And so I think very much that's also the culture that we want to have at Olin, which is that, you know, anybody going through our program sort of can look at the situation and say like, yeah, okay, here's broadly what I think we want to get done. Okay, now how do we make that happen?
Yeah.
And they just are able to drive results. And so that comes from learning to work in context, understanding details, not sort of applying rote, sort of undifferentiated solutions to problems and hoping they fit, but really sort of deeply understanding it and being able to explain it to other people and get them to understand what they need to do to make that solution work.
Yeah, very good. So, you know, one of the important questions for the viewers, this prospective students, what is the advice that you would offer students considering an online MBA and specifically an Olin online MBA?
So we anticipate that the majority of the people coming into our online MBA program, will be continuing to work as professionals, right? So it makes the most like now. That doesn't rule out someone who's re-entering after, for example, starting a family, okay, or who, for whatever reason, is able to take some time off and do this in parallel with perhaps social services or anything they're doing. So I wouldn't want to rule it out, but it in general is going to be somebody who is looking to keep working or, you know, is actively involved in something else, and so this is added on to it. And so I think it's the key is that really they have to be somebody who's looking for a program that prepares them for the future. Okay. And that sets them up for a migration into that possibly. If this is a person who says, look, I'm in an old line industry. I don't see a lot of growth here. I don't see many of the organizations within it or my organization in particular being particularly well suited to that. And I really don't want to get stuck 5 or 10 years from now with you know, an industry that's really been eliminated. And so I want to jump on and go. So I think that's a good step, right? If you know, to really look at what's going on in your space, okay, and decide whether you want to do it. Now, the full-time MBA for anybody is still a go-to choice if you want to take that long 2-year process and interview and look for other jobs, and you really feel confident in that process to sort of help you reposition and move into a new direction. And so I think that's going to be the case. But I think there's a large number of people where that 2 years is either sort of financially unattractive, personally unattractive because they just enjoy work and the identity is sort of wrapped up in this. And so I think, you know, it's really for people that are continuing to be involved in a broader set of issues than strictly their school, but are looking for somebody that really prepares them and sets them up for a sort of a pathway that wouldn't be accessible without it. And I'm a really, you know, my MBA is almost 40 years old now. And I still, you know, I believe as firmly about it now as I did in 1991 when I got it. All right. And so I think the you know, the practical reality is that it does change your game. It does give you an opportunity to work with a super smart group of people, to experiment and take chances that you can't take at work because it's work, and you've got other consequences that spill over there. And so from a development standpoint, the MBA is still a terrific experience, and I think it's worth it if you invest and if you take it seriously. It won't solve problems that you aren't willing to work on yourself, but it will certainly give you a leg up if you're willing to do that. And so we very much want our online MBA to be that kind of experience, that you're in sessions with people where you go like, wow, that was really kind of interesting. That person works for that company, and I got to, have a chance to sort of interact with that. And now I see myself in a different way, both positively and perhaps, so I got to do a little bit of catch up here. And so all of that, I think, is what you should be looking for, the program that gives you that kind of sort of feel. And, I think that's what we're trying to build as we stand up our program.
Yeah, very good. Well, I guess what else do you want people to know? What did we not talk about?
Well, I think that the thing that's really exciting to me is how much we've learned about the way people learn. Yeah. And how much of that is coming into the design of what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And again, one of the advantages of all the data, the fact that we're able to capture so much, is that we're now able to actually look at teaching and learning in a light that we haven't in the technology in the traditional classroom, which is probably anywhere from 1,000 to 500 years old. Yeah. And really, it works. It's its own unique. And it wouldn't have that sort of durability if it didn't work. Right. But I think we're really at the edge or the beginning of a new sort of era of a much more systematic understanding of brain science and learning and how we acquire expertise and how those things fit together. And when you move away from the traditional show up for 90 minutes twice a week kind of classroom to something where you can interact in a bunch of different ways using technology, suddenly it opens up a huge number of development experiences that haven't traditionally been available. And so I think that's also one of the reasons why, if you're at all curious about an online program, to think about it and look for programs like Olin, that where, they take that element seriously. I'm a lifetime athlete. I've been running since I was in high school. And I continue to be impressed by how much we discover every year about how to get in shape, and how much more sophisticated it is. And so I think the same thing is going on in education. Yeah. And I think look for schools that take that seriously, that think about the pedagogy as a science and as an art, and are really interested in exploring that. And I think we've got a Center for Digital Education that is really second to none, in my opinion. And we're able to use them as a resource for faculty coming like, well, I'm trying to do this. You got some ideas on how we might do that? And say, well, I do, as a matter of fact. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm hoping that there's a kind of a discovery for people that they'll also understand their own learning style and their own systems of learning and how they acquire, because let's face it, you're not done after your MBA. It's only the first of many, many educational or development experiences you're going to be looking for, some of which you'll mediate, some of which you'll go back to school and have somebody else sort of structure for you. But there's no doubt that I think being good at learning and being good at participating in learning systems is going to be a core skill, right, for people that are ultimately really successful. Used to be we discovered athletes, right? Now you discover and you train them for 40 years. Right. Yeah. And I think the same was with managers and leaders. We used to discover them, but no, you discover and you cultivate them for 30 or 40 years. And I think it's really, that is the world of the future, I think.
Well, that is fantastic. Very interesting, lively discussion. Tell our viewers how to find out more. What's the best way for them to get in touch with Olin directly?
All right, so the key is to go to our web pages, where we actually have a fair amount of detail about the things that I've been talking about here, and certainly reach out to our admissions teams. And I encourage you, if you're interested in following up on anything that I've sort of discussed here, whether you're interested in our program or you're an instructor or a faculty someplace else, and you're sort of curious about sort of where our thinking is on this, to go ahead and reach out to me. My email is fairly simple. It's moreton@wustl.edu. I'm open to any inquiries people have on that. And I'm also happy to talk about the program in addition to what our admissions teams can do. And so I invite you to be curious about us and just say yes.
Absolutely. Great ending. Thanks, Patrick, very much for your time today.
Thanks for having me,
And,
Christy.
thanks to all of the viewers who turned in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Ciao.